Stay fly. Stay fly.
But a lot of people believe that as long as I'm not putting my hands on people, then I'm not racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. As long as I'm not saying kill these people, then I'm not those things. And I'm like, no, there's also microaggressions.
Yo, I thought you were super progressive.
You can cancel me now?
Well, you always say, leave it to the black woman. Hey, this is Seiko, Fly Guys, Seiko from the Fly Guys podcast. There are times when I interview people that I really don't necessarily agree with, or I don't agree with all of their positions. This is one of those times. But enjoy the ride.
Stay fly, stay fly. You're listening to The Fly Guy Show. They do everything on the fly and in such a fly manner. Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
The views expressed on the Fly Guy podcast by the guests of the Fly Guy podcast are only the views of the guests, unless we say we agree, unless explicitly stated.
Hey, this is Ernie Thomas here on the Bold School Podcast. You're listening to Psycho Vonner's Fly Guy Podcast. Support, like, subscribe, and share. He's saying some good things. Share it. Don't keep it to yourself.
2, 1. It's another episode of the Fly Guys Podcast. One of the flyest guys around, my man Dan Omi. Hip Hop Salute. What's up, brethren? And we have Queenie, the curator. What's up, beautiful? How you doing?
Hello, hello.
Okay.
I'm good.
Good stuff. Tonight we're going to talk about safe spaces. I tell you, the concept of safe spaces has been coming up more and more with the people that I interact with. And it's not just necessarily racial, it's gender, it's belief system, it's political affiliation. It's like everyone is kind of latching on to the term safe spaces. And I know that Eddie was really the one who wanted us to discuss safe spaces. So let's start off with what's a working definition. And you know who we're going to go to? We're going to throw that to my man, Dan Omi, Mr. Working Definition, Mr. Socially Progressive. What's a safe space, bro?
And I'm going to use the definition I use in my classroom. A safe space is a space that actually a safer space, right? Because sometimes we can create a safe space and sometimes it'll be unsafe for someone. But a safer space is a place where we could all be our full, true, authentic selves, where self-determination is like the motivating factor for what's going on, right? So I like to say Kujichagulia because that's my favorite Kwanzaa principle. And it's really about self-determination. Allow people to be who they are, identify themselves to be who they are, and be their true self. And it should also be a liberating space. So even if I go in and let's say, for example, I do make somebody feel unsafe, it's a space where I'm held accountable, right? And I'm allowed that space for a learning process so that I can learn why what I said or did was wrong and made somebody else feel unsafe, but also because liberation should be about both of us as well, not just the victim, but also myself as well.
That's interesting that you use the term safer space. Mm-hmm. I hadn't heard that. I'm not as socially progressive as you are, bruh. I'm still learning. I guess this.
We all learning though, and that's what I'm saying. Like what just happened right here. I allowed you to learn, go through that process, and be like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I didn't say that before, and it allowed people to grow because a lot of times we don't know. Right? And just because I don't know doesn't mean I should be ostracized, So
but we're in an environment where we're in a cancel environment. We're canceling people, we're Xing people out, we're muting people. That doesn't seem consistent with the concept of safer spaces. And what's interesting to me is the people who, and many times I've seen people who are pushing for safer spaces are more apt to cancel and mute people who aren't progressing as quickly as they should. Am I wrong in that? Am I off base? I know I am a lot.
No. I agree with you. I agree with you. It's funny because I'm going back to myself. Like I had a blog, right? And right. I left my blog up, right? And there's some pieces in my blog that are that are, transphobic, that are homophobic, that are misogynistic, that are, I could go on and on with the different things that I believed in back then, but I left it up, and a lot of people hit me up and say, I found this on your blog, and I was like, yeah, look at the timestamp. Like, look, yeah, I did believe in those things. I did spout those things. I did, even though, for example, just because I wasn't out attacking people of the LGBT community and beating them up and dragging them in the street doesn't mean I still wasn't homophobic, right? I was still creating a space. I was still creating spaces where it was hostile to them, right? Even just in what I was writing and what I was saying. So, and I had to grow from that, right? And fortunately for me, I had people in my life who really were like, hey, you need to evolve, you need to change, and they held me accountable. And they also allowed me time to process, even though, let me be clear, even though people of the LGBT community really don't have time for us to get to evolve, because a lot of them are dying, right? We're killing a lot of them. So a lot of times they don't have the time for us to really evolve like we need to be evolving. But there are people in my life that gave me that space to evolve and to process and to learn, to really educate. They educated me on a lot of things, and they gave me that time to do that. So I do believe that we do need to allow people time to learn and process and grow, because we didn't all come out the womb like this, right? I didn't come out the womb this way. So at the same time, I need to be held accountable, right? If what I say is affecting people on different levels, I need to be held accountable for that. I need to be checked on that. Do I need to be canceled? I don't know. Depending, to be honest, depending on how much damage I cause, I might need to be canceled, right? Because I might have caused some really bad, I might have really destroyed some lives. And that's probably where we need to have that discussion, right?
So when I think about safe space, I think that there's safe space and there's learning space. And safe space is really for people that are marginalized. So safe space is about the people that are marginalized and having space for them to exist without microaggressions happening. Learning space is different from safe space. Learning space is space where we know we're walking into this space and the possibility of a microaggression is possible, but we're going to give you the space to learn. Those are two very different things.
Okay. I like that.
Danny, I thought you were super progressive.
You gonna cancel me now?
Well, you always say, leave it to the black woman. So, safe spaces and learning. Now, is that just your concept, or is that something that's well known?
I think that in certain circles, I mean, it's I guess it's growing. I know that there's a clash where we're asking people to, I don't want to have microaggressions in whatever area it is, right? So I go to a majority white church, and I didn't go to church today because I didn't feel like being microaggressed. And so there are times that I just take that, and they think they're safe and they're not. And so for me, I have to, because I'm the co-chair of the Racial Justice Task Force there. And so when I have those meetings, I recognize that those are, that's learning space. So I give the room for them to have the conversation. So there has to be, it shouldn't be my labor in order for someone to learn. That's not my responsibility.
Sure indeed.
Are you learning as well in that learning space?
Am I?
Yes.
Usually not, to be honest. Because I mean, I know this walk as a Black lesbian, right? So I'm really, I don't have to try to understand what it is to be in power. What do I need to know that for? That's not, I may be clarifying, but I'm not interested at all about. I don't need to know about their power position.
Interesting.
It's not yeah. I mean, and I get that a lot. Like, so for instance, my maintenance guy said that I have a household of man haters. And so I said, I mean, I'm going to be frank about it. There's an app for dating that I'm not sure how it works because it's not mine, but it doesn't allow dick pics in the same way that these other apps do. So like Tinder, I guess you can just send dick pics to whomever you choose to.
All right.
And this particular app is set up by women so that they just don't get unsolicited dick pics. Because we don't want unsolicited dick pics. It's just not what we want.
Okay.
That's a thing in the dating world.
That's the thing. That's the thing in all social media apps. So even I get dick pics, and I'm not even trying to look for any. So just an FYI, you know. Yeah.
What is that about? What is this about?
I don't know. I guess you know, a lot of men assume if I just show him this, then you know he's gonna want me. I don't know. So.
Okay. So
I get that on Twitter too. If I'm going through some various tweets, like one of the tweets for our podcast, and you know, I clicked on it, and I was like, I don't want to see that. And I also get those same pictures from women too. I'm a little happier to see those, but those aren't solicited as well.
No, they're not solicited. Yeah, if you didn't ask for them, they're not solicited.
You know, I went to the Comic-Con today here in Tidewater, and one of the signs said, "Cosplay is not consent."
Correct.
And I was like, "Oh, that's fire! That's fire!" Just because I'm dressed up that way, and this is my interpretation of it, doesn't mean that you can take a picture of me. Because I didn't ask you to take a picture of it. I didn't give you permission to take a picture of it. Or it might be just because I'm in this outfit doesn't mean you can address me the way those characters address each other in the anime. And it probably means a whole bunch of other stuff that was totally above my head. But I just thought it was kind of fire that says cosplay is not consent. And, you know, I guess we should say, hey, Twitter handles are not consent either.
That's correct. That's correct.
So what you just did was a good example. So are you saying that when I said something about dick pics, are you saying that you think that there are as many dick pics and equal amount of, I guess, vulva pics?
Clip pics?
That are sent out? Are you saying that it's equally so?
I don't think that's the equal amount.
I have no idea. Those aren't things I look for.
Yeah. I've been told by women that they get a lot of unsolicited dick pics, like consistently, whether they're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever, Tinder. They tell me all the time. But like I said, I've gotten a few, you know, in my DMs. I've gotten a few. So I mean, I believe them from the start. So, I'm pretty sure there's way more. I don't know how we get to this tangent.
Okay,
way more dick pics.
We're gonna blame this one on Tessa. We're gonna blame this one on Queen. You know, leave it to the black woman.
So what happens is when we have these kind of conversations, and I'm talking about women, and you know, we are marginalized, and you know, we don't want to have these dick pics, and then your response, Seiko, is, well, women do it too. And so I feel like
I don't think that's fair assessment of what I said.
Wait, that's what you said.
My point was that without consent, and you said consent, without consent, anytime somebody pushes something on you is wrong.
Yes, but I was talking about marginalized people. So I see what you're saying, but in talking about marginalized people and whether this is safe space or not, then a lot of times the space is specifically for the person that is marginalized. And so you asking me, is that learning space for me too? And my answer is, I'm not interested in learning about people in power. They have the platform all the time. So I'm not interested in that. Okay. But do you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but my question was, since the term learning space was new to me, I wanted to know if it was reciprocal. You just stated it wasn't. I'm cool with that.
For me.
I just hadn't heard the term before, and I'm learning. And I guess you don't care if I learn or not.
No, in this case, it's learning space. It's not necessarily safe space, and I recognize that. So I'm giving you that room. I'm okay with that. But I'm just saying that was an example of how it plays out. Do you get what I'm saying?
We good.
Okay.
I got you loud and clear. I was just wondering, we went on that tangent. That was like, look at left field.
But, yeah, because I was, anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think the interesting thing about safer spaces is that they're seeming to pop up. The term safer spaces is popping up. I was in a event yesterday, and a lady raised her hand and said, I hope I'm in a safe space because I want to share my reality. And we were in a business meeting. And I was like, whoa, safe space in a business meeting. Business meeting where, it was predominantly women. The facilitator was a woman. We were talking about women in business. I was kind of like a guest in the room. And it was interesting to me that in that environment, she kind of asked permission or wanted to make sure that it was a safe space. And I was like, wow, I never considered this concept of safer spaces in a business setting. And I also have heard people use that term in political arenas. I go to the events for both the Democrat and the Republican Party, and I've heard people in both of those meetings and those events say, a safer space for us to discuss our views. So I just think it's interesting that the term safe space, not necessarily safer, that's a new one on me too, but the term safe space is starting to be used in multiple locations.
And you're right. I see that happen more and more in different places that I go to. I hear that asked often, all the time. And you're right. I agree with you. I do want to say this though, because I think debate is healthy. I think it's wonderful. I think there should be debates. But there are some ideas that I feel are completely hostile, and I feel like if I feel like your ideas are oppressing and continue are in the process or are going to or used in policy to oppress other people, then I don't think those views need to be discussed. I sincerely believe that. I sincerely believe that if you have an opinion that eventually ends up oppressing a group of people, then we don't need to be discussing it. That's exactly how I feel. I know people have an issue with that, and I see that happen in political arenas as well. Where people will have a policy that they want to discuss, and I feel like that policy is kind of oppressive. I don't think we should be discussing it. And some people are like, but you're being hostile to me, and I'm like, nah, I think you're being hostile to those people. And I think that so because people try to use that as a way to get whatever they feel out there,
Right.
All right. Well, are there rules to this ish, like Biggie said?
There are rules. I mean, general rules. So one is confidentiality. So when someone says that, I want to make sure that this is safe space, that's, I'm not going to be attacked when I say what I say. And B, I want to make sure that what I say stays here and it's not put out there when we leave this room. So there's a sense of confidentiality. So every meeting that I've ever been in and we said it was safe space has always had confidentiality.
We usually say agreements. We usually say up front, we say these are the agreements, and if you can't agree to this, then you can either leave or we won't do it. But I call them agreements because I think probably the most difficult things that I face is getting people to buy in to the idea of a safer space. Getting into that idea of not only being a part of the safer space, but also to defend that safer space, right? So when they see someone breaking those agreements, they can address that. They can say, hey, you agreed to this. You shouldn't be doing, exactly opposite of what we all agreed on.
Why would you need to get buy-in for people to agree to being in a quote-unquote safe or safer space? What are some of the things that people don't seem to agree to?
I think confidentiality. That's probably the easiest one to break, right? Because sometimes we'll learn some information, and sometimes our intentions aren't bad, but we might relay that to someone else, and then word gets around, and that's fucked up. Even if my intentions were good, that's still fucked up, So we have to get people to agree that whatever we discuss in here, we're not, like, for example, let's say we're in a safer space right here, right now, and I discuss something that I want, I'm telling you all in confidence. And right. you and Queenie go, after it's over, you and Queenie go out and get coffee and you discuss what I discuss. Even though I did tell y'all that's not something we should discuss outside of where we at right here, unless I'm present. So even though your intentions may be good, that's still a break of confidentiality, right? So a lot of people do it casually. I've seen people do it casually, like they didn't have any bad intentions, but I'm like, hey, that person's not here, or what we discussed was discussed in there, and we kind of resolved it. And that goes back to trying to resolve whatever issue it is. Like if we resolve the issue here, even if and then I walk away and then I go tell my boy, then obviously the issue wasn't resolved, and we got to resolve that. So, but I think confidentiality is probably the biggest one that we all break. I'm guilty of that too, right? And that's one that we break consistently, but we have to agree to that. We have to buy into that what stays here, what happens here stays here.
That's one of the great things about you, Dan Trez. You admit to your flaws. And I think that's a great example that you're displaying. I love that. What says you, Queenie?
So I think that when I'm in a meeting, like I said, I'm the co-chair of the Racial Justice Task Force. And a lot of times issues come up that we will move on past that. And the people that are used to being in positions of power, specifically white men, they will continue to talk about that. And so part of what we have to do is agree that those people that are in positions of power have to step back. And that's part of our rules. So we say, give space for introverts, for women, for marginalized people, and those people that are traditionally in positions of power to step back and give that space to them. So that's one of our agreements that we say in our meeting.
How?
Call it step up, step back.
Step up, step back. All right. And you do this with your church primarily. How well has it been accepted with the rest of the members who are not part of the task force?
It's difficult because people are used to being able to say what they want to say when they want to say it. And then we say, no, that's not an option for you right now. And then we'll do things like, if you've already had the floor, then we'll bypass you and give somebody else the floor. A lot of people that are in, and they don't even realize it a lot of times, that are in positions of power, it's uncomfortable for them because they want to just be able to say what they want to say. They're used to it. Women communicate very differently than men do. We often will wait for that space in order to speak. And extroverts will, that space is not as large. And so introverts and men, often there's a battle between women, men, introverts, and extroverts when we're having these conversations. So we have to give that space to introverts and we have to give that space to women when we're having these conversations.
And I'm glad you talked about extroverts and introverts, because that's one thing we also try to do. We try to say, hey, you people over here usually speak the most. We want to hear from other people as well. We want to hear their opinions, what they have to say. And usually, the introverts usually have a lot to say, and then again, it's for extrovert, it's an ego thing too, checking your ego at the door, because you want to say everything. You want the floor to yourself. So for the extroverts, it's an ego thing. But I agree. I'm glad that you said that. I'm really glad.
Yeah.
When we deal with religious values, and I guess let's go with your church as one. Well, your church may not be a good example, and I should probably give some context. And I can't define your church, so I'll let you define it for those who are listening to it a little later on. I'm sure they need some context for my statement. What church do you attend, and what does your church value?
Okay, Coastal Virginia Unitarian Universalist.
Oh, okay.
I'm a Unitarian, and we have principles that we follow. We are not a faith-based religion. We are a behavior-based religion. So it really doesn't matter if your original faith is Christianity, or if you're a Buddhist, or whatever brings you to the table. It's how you behave and how you treat people and how you treat the earth and those kinds of things. So we're behavior-based, not faith-based. Whatever gets you there is, we believe that you should be in search of your own truth.
Okay. So with that being said, that's why I said that your church may not be a great example to go with. But there's a great debate about what just happened in Alabama with abortion, and we're going to stay on safe spaces. So where is a safe space to have that conversation? Or, like Dan Trez says, simply because the decisions can and are oppressing people, should we have them at all? So is there a safe space to have the conversation, or should we not have the conversation?
I think the only way to make that a safer space is for men to shut the fuck up and let the women talk about it. Because when we see that debate online, we see it at City Hall, it's mostly old white men talking. You know what I'm saying? It's mostly religious, men of the cloth, quote unquote, who are talking about that. And I don't see women being allowed that opportunity to talk, unless they're protesting out in the street. I don't see that being, I don't see that happening. People that are making these decisions are not women. And that is completely hostile space for women, completely hostile. So the only way really to fix it is to then get out the way and let women talk about their reproductive rights and their, and the agencies of their own bodies. Really, that's the only way it's going to work.
So yes, I think that men definitely need to keep their mouths closed about this, because again, this is my body, and there's a lot of things that men don't even understand about our bodies, and they're making decisions about them. It's like there's a meme going around, a cartoon with dogs making a decision about felines. That's what it's like. It's like, makes no sense. But it goes back to, all the laws, the pink tax, taxes on feminine products and menstruation products, and not on other medical things because they consider it cosmetic. This is ridiculous. So, it's maternity leave, and it's all of the things that have to do with women's health, and men make these decisions.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that men need to not be part of the conversation, because those are the ones that actually do the voting, unfortunately. And so men need to speak up and talk to their brothers, right? So that when they go vote, that they vote the right way. So what's happening right now is they're not listening to women, and then they're still making a vote. There has to be a conversation.
Interesting.
Good point. No, you made a good point about the voting, and you're right about that. I stand corrected. Like, yeah, but I just would like to see more women being allowed to speak, and help, and also make those decisions and write that policy, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. Well, what can we do to create safer spaces?
Overall, or
let's start overall, and then we can narrow it down as we see fit.
I know what happened to me. Personally, what happened to me was I asked the question that I asked myself when I leave work, or when I leave. Say, for example, I teach capoeira on Sundays. When I leave my capoeira class on Sundays, the question that I always ask myself is, did I leave the space safer than it was when I first got here?
Yes.
And sometimes that answer is no. Sometimes that answer is yes, but there are times when that answer is no. And then I have to ask myself, how do I make it safer when I get back here? What do I need to do to make it safer? Or did I not, I saw something happen and I didn't defend that person, right? When one of my women colleagues has an idea and she brings it up in a meeting and no one pays attention to her, do I say, hey, wait a second, she had an idea, we should address it? Did I do that, or did I just not say nothing? And I consistently ask myself that question first. So I always do that self-check when I leave work, and then figure out a plan when I come back. That's the first thing I do. Second thing is getting people to buy in. That's probably the biggest hurdle, getting people to buy into safer spaces. Well, you might change something different in your space. We're not going to use these words, right? But you might have someone who's going to say, well, I've been using this word all my life. It ain't bother nobody. My best friend is black. My girlfriend is black, or I have friends who are gay and they let me say it. So I think I could say it here. And this is kind of getting people to buy in is probably the hardest part of the entire conversation.
What are some of the other things that people have been resistant to changing to make safer spaces? Mention some of the terminology.
Yeah, terminology. Usually it's terminology, but also how we address people. How do we address people? The terms that we use. For example, a good one is saying female. And I always correct people when they say, well, females do this, and I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about female birds or female crickets? What are you talking about? Because I don't understand what you're saying. Just like she was saying, like Queenie was saying, microaggressions, right? A lot of people will say, I don't understand what the big deal is about this particular microaggression. They'll say that. And I'm like, well, this is why it's racist or it's sexist or whatever, and you shouldn't be doing that, But a lot of people believe that as long as I'm not putting my hands on people, then I'm not racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. As long as I'm not saying kill these people, then I'm not those things. And I'm like, no, there's also microaggressions. There's those things as well. So I know I get a lot of kickback from the microaggressions as well as the terminology.
So I want to be clear about safe space not just being a group setting. Safe space I had to explain to my students the other day that sexual harassment isn't just you saying something directly to another person. I could be in the room, the two of you say something to each other, because I'm there and I hear it, that still can be considered sexual harassment.
Yep.
And so safe space means that I am not going to feel uncomfortable in this space. And it could just be with the three of us. Safe space is not just a group setting. It is I'm a lesbian. And so I always hear people say little comments about, they will straight out say dyke. That's not okay. Living in this area is very difficult because in this area, saying homophobic things that they think, they say that they're fruity. They say that, such and such is gay. They're saying, it's all kinds of things. Tell that boy to man up, all kinds of things that are said. And I'm in that space. And that makes that space unsafe for me. So I don't talk about any of the things. And so people will say, you are really distant. I am, because I can't trust you. So that's not safe space.
You're right.
How do we make those spaces safer? The ones you just discussed, the classrooms,
Well, in the classroom, I do not allow, and I say this. I said, we do not say negative things about other people or about ourselves. So we're not allowed to call ourselves stupid. We're not allowed to say that somebody else is stupid. We don't use the R word retarded. We don't use the F word faggot. We don't use the N word nigger. We don't use, and I go through that. And so all year long, I'm certainly saying over and over and over to my students, you will not do that in my classroom. Ever. And so I constantly say that this space in my classroom is a safe space. And I'm not going to tolerate, not only can you not do it to other people, but you can't do it to yourself. So that's how I created it.
Do you think those students are taking the mantle that you're lighting and carrying and taking it into their homes and their communities where some of those conversations are normal? In Portsmouth, the women of the LGBTQ plus IA community use that term dyke amongst themselves, and many of those children are raised in those homes. So do you think, and so I'm saying this because of the experiences I had in Portsmouth, so do you think that the message that you're taking, the mantle that you're taking, is moving into the children and moving into the community? Because I think that's the direction that we need. In all
marginalized groups, we often take the word that is used against us and use it for ourselves. We do it with the N word, we do it with the B word, we do it with that's what we do. We do it with the F word. We do that because we take the sting off. We can call each other, if we're in this group, that name.
My question is, do you think the students are taking your vantage point, your message, and taking it into the community?
Well, I think some of them do. They talk to me about it and they say that's not right. We just had a huge conversation about immigration, and my school is 100% free lunch and 95% black, and they said it smells like illegal immigrants in the hallway. Like, who says that? And so I had to check them. And not only did I check them, but then I went to the soccer coach and said, this is what the kids are saying. And so he had a whole conversation with them about that. And so I think that as long as we make it not okay and we don't give them passes, then it will continue. We have to stay on top of it.
And so something you said, Seiko, in your question that I think is important is that I'm not saying all the students leave with that, with that idea, but as long as they're having those conversations, right? Because I had students come back to me and said, hey, I said this around my mom and my dad, and they said this. And I'm like, but at least you're having those conversations. Right. Because I know for me, it wasn't an overnight thing. It was having these conversations consistently and learning and being educated. And that's what I want my students to do.
Good stuff. We have 15 seconds. Queen, you want to end this?
Well, I just want to say that we need to work every day on ourselves in order to make the space around us safe spaces for other people.
All right. And I just want to say, stay fly. Stay fly. Stay fly. Stay fly. Stay fly. Stay fly.
Stay fly.
The views expressed on the Fly Guy Podcast by the guests of the Fly Guy Podcast are only the views of the guests, unless we say we agree, unless explicitly stated.
Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
Stay conscious. Stay fly.